You know, when you think about the world's major religions, you probably picture these ancient, unchanging institutions. But what if one of the biggest faiths on the planet isn't static at all? What if its entire history, its very survival, has always depended on its incredible ability to reinvent itself? Well, that's the big idea from historian Andrew F. Walls, whose work shows how Christianity has been in a constant state of reinvention right from the very beginning.
So, how do you even begin to wrap your head around this puzzle? Well, Walls came up with this great thought experiment. Imagine you're a scholarly space visitor and you drop in on planet Earth every few hundred years just to study this group called Christians. What would you see? Would you even have a clue that you were looking at the same religion each time? It's a fun idea, but it really gets to the absolute heart of Christian history.
All right, let's make this real. On the one hand, you've got an Aramaic-speaking Jewish Christian around the year 37. Their entire faith is lived out through Jewish law, Jewish diet, and worship at the temple in Jerusalem. For them, Jesus is the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. Now, let's jump forward 2,000 years. We're in Nigeria with a Yoruba-speaking Christian. Their faith is alive with these huge, vibrant street processions, a focus on the power of the Holy Spirit, and they see Jesus as a universal Lord for all people. The language, the culture, the practices, they couldn't be more different. So how on earth do you draw a line connecting these two?
The key that unlocks this whole mystery actually comes from the life of Andrew Walls himself. See, he wasn't just some dusty academic sitting in a library reading old texts. His own life took a sharp turn that completely changed how he saw the entire story of Christianity.
And this quote from him just says it all. While he was teaching in West Africa, he had this incredible aha moment. He realized, wait a minute, I'm not just reading about the early church in some old book. I'm living in a modern version of it. The young, dynamic churches he saw growing all around him in Sierra Leone and Nigeria became this amazing, living lens for understanding the ancient past. And for him, that changed absolutely everything.
I mean, his journey started out pretty standard, right? An Oxford-trained historian focusing on the early European church. But then he goes to Sierra Leone and Nigeria, and that classic training just gets turned on its head. He had to grapple with a Christianity that wasn't some European export, but was a living faith putting down totally new roots in African soil. This experience was so powerful that it led him to basically invent a whole new field of study, world Christianity, which looks at the faith as the truly global, multicultural thing it's become.
So, what was the big idea? How did Walls explain everything he was seeing? It all boiled down to one powerful, incredibly elegant concept that he called the translation principle. And folks, this is the aha moment. This is the idea that makes 2,000 years of radical change make sense.
Okay, so here it is in a nutshell. The central idea of Christianity is designed to be translated. It's infinitely translatable. Unlike religions that are tied to one sacred language or one original culture, this faith is meant to be reborn over and over again in the local language, customs, and ideas of any new group that embraces it. And this is the key. That means cultural diversity isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's not an accident, it's a necessary part of the whole deal.
And Walls says this principle starts right at the very top. The first and most important act of translation was the Incarnation itself. The Word became flesh. God didn't just become human in some vague abstract way. God became a specific human, a first-century Jew in Roman-occupied Palestine. And that set the pattern. From then on, as the faith moved into Greek culture, Roman culture, Northern European cultures, and now into countless African and Asian cultures, it had to do the same thing. It had to translate itself to be truly heard. Now, to really make this point hit home, Walls contrasts this with the model in Islam. He points out that in Islam, the ultimate revelation is a text, the Quran, and its divine status is really tied to its original Arabic language. This has created this incredibly powerful unifying force, leading to what you could call a single, recognizable Islamic civilization across the world. But in Christianity, the ultimate revelation isn't a text, it's a person, Christ. And because a person can be known and understood in any language or culture, it doesn't lead to one single Christian civilization. Instead, as Walls argues, it leads to a whole series of different ones throughout history.
But, okay, it's not quite that simple. This whole translation process creates this constant push and pull, a healthy tension inside the faith. And Walls spotted these two competing forces that are always at work whenever Christianity enters a new culture.
He called them the indigenizing principle and the pilgrim principle. Think of the indigenizing principle as the faith's homing instinct. It's what makes the church feel like a place to feel at home, using local music and worship or answering questions that matter to that specific community. But pulling against it is the pilgrim principle.
This is the part of the faith that says, hey, don't get too comfortable. It's what challenges local customs that might not be right, things like a caste system or old tribal hatreds. It's this constant balancing act that keeps the faith from just being completely absorbed and disappearing into the local culture.
So you might be thinking, okay, that's a cool theory, but is there any proof? Well, the most dramatic proof of Wall's theory is happening right now as we speak, and it's one of the biggest religious stories of the last 500 years, the massive shift in Christianity's center of gravity.
Get this, because the numbers are staggering. Back in 1900, about 80% of all the Christians in the world lived in Europe and North America. It very much looked like a Western religion, but today, that is completely flipped on its head. Now the vast majority, we're talking around 60%, live in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This isn't just some small trend. This is a seismic demographic earthquake.
Yeah, 60%. Let that number just hang in the air for a second. This is the clearest evidence you could possibly ask for that this translation process Andrew Walls was talking about isn't just some dusty historical theory. It is the living, breathing engine of Christianity today. And what this means is that we have to basically tear up our old mental maps. For centuries, the West saw Africa as a mission field, a place to receive the faith from somewhere else. But that's not the reality anymore. Today, Africa is a furnace of Christian energy and new ideas. It is a new heartland, and it is actively shaping what the faith is going to look like for the rest of this century. So all of this brings us to the final, and let's be honest, maybe the most challenging conclusion of Andrew Wall's entire work. Because if the face of Christianity has changed this much, then how we think and talk about it has to change too. And this is where Walls really throws down the gauntlet, especially for people in the West. He says any serious conversation about the faith today needs to come to terms with Christianity as a non-Western religion. What he's saying is, just look at the numbers. Look at where the growth is, where the energy is, where the new questions are coming from. The simple demographic fact is that Christianity has become a non-Western faith. Which leaves us with one last, massive question. Walls has shown us a faith that has managed to survive for 2,000 years by doing something amazing, repeatedly dying in one cultural form, only to be reborn in a new one. It went from a small Jewish sect to the official faith of the Roman Empire, to a European religion, and now to a global faith with its heart in the South. So, if that constant process of translation was the secret to its past, what on earth will its next chapter look like? And where will it find its next home?